Perfect. Oh. Thank you so much. It is a huge pleasure to be here. I've been incredibly impressed and amazed by all of the talks. So thank you so much for all of those. Amazing talks, amazing posters, and just really great to visit. The title and topic of my talk here today is Scientific Explanation. This is a talk and a project on distinguishing explanations in the life sciences that are good, bad, and better. The topic of scientific explanation is, of course, one that receives a lot of attention in many different domains, especially in philosophy and especially in science. In this presentation, I'm going to focus on causal explanation in particular. This is a kind of explanation that we view as very common in the life sciences. We think of it as also very common in everyday life. One way to think about causal explanations is with the phrase that you see on this slide, causes explain their effects. So if we look to the life sciences, we can see different types of effects and outcomes that scientists are interested in explaining. These include things like their interest in explaining measles in the human population, differences in eye color in fruit flies. They want to explain firing of neurons in our body and gene expression. What it means to say that scientists are giving causal explanations of these types of outcomes is that they are identifying and referring to the main causes that account for, that are responsible for, and that thus explain these outcomes. Now, while it's quite easy to say causes explain their effects, it's actually pretty difficult to say which exact causes are explanatory and why. Also to say what types of detail, causal and other, are not explanatory, and again, why this is the case. This is a project that can be referred to as explanatory relevance. Here we're interested in how scientists are determining what details are relevant and irrelevant to explaining that kind of outcome that they're interested in. One way in which we can see how challenging this is with various debates that have to do with explanatory relevance. So if we look to public contexts, there are debates about whether COVID is explained by a virus, as medical communities suggest, or whether it's explained by 5G wireless networks, right? A debate about what's explanatorily relevant to this disease outcome. We also see examples of this, however, in scientific contexts. One case, which Danny Bassett and I have discussed in a fairly recent paper, has to do with the use of the term mechanism and views in neuroscience and many other life sciences that mechanism is a term that picks out the relevant causal structure in giving an explanation for an outcome. The place where we see various puzzles or disagreements or debates is that mechanism means different things to different scientists in these communities. So sometimes a causal mechanism is picking out causes at a molecular level. In other cases, it's picking out some kind of causal structure that's relevant at a network level. So there's a sort of agreement on mechanism as a standard, but when you actually explore further, there's disagreement about what kind of causal structure that refers to. A second case where we see debates about explanatory relevance is in philosophy, right? It'd be unsurprising that philosophers are involved in debates on this topic. But one example of these are cases where philosophers appreciate or view that for any outcome of interest, there's a causal history that extends back quite far. And that if you look back far enough, the Big Bang is going to be off in the kind of distant history. That looks like it's a cause because it's in the history. It isn't one that we're citing in explanations in the life sciences or everyday life explanations. So there's a kind of question here about whether that's justified or should we be citing all of this detail far back in the causal history of an outcome, right? What types of causes should we be citing in our explanations? Part of what we can see here is a focus on this topic of explanatory relevance, but also scientific explanation. These are two topics that are important and that matter for all sorts of concrete reasons. A first reason for why these topics matter is in clarifying the standards that we have in science. So there are many places where we have specified scientific standards, and they are guiding the research that is funded and the research that is published. We want to make sure that these standards are capturing successful explanatory and causal practice. We want to make sure that they're supporting the right types of work. Part of what I'll suggest here is that in some cases, a philosopher can examine these standards and come into these discussions and make suggestions about cases where the standards look like they're too high or they're too low, or maybe they're ambiguous. In the context of mechanism as a standard, you might think that it can be a kind of ambiguous standard in the sense that it means many different things to different audiences. So this is a first reason for why these topics matter. A second has to do with science communication. When the public asks us why COVID is explained by a virus and not 5G wireless networks, they deserve an answer, and it should be a good one. It should be clear, it should be convincing, and it should capture the justification and the rationale that we have in science. It's there, but it's not always easy to say what exactly that rationale and that justification is. And then after capturing what that justification is, we need to make sure that we're communicating it to different audiences, right? It's one thing for scientists to work very hard at getting justified, rational, causal explanations, but if we can't actually communicate them to the public, we're not going to reap the benefits of this scientific knowledge, and the public deserves a kind of conversation that's clear about why science gives us our best understanding of the world. Third reason, we want to make sure that science is being used to give successful outputs and have positive impact on society. It is possible to get a causal explanation wrong, and when we do, this can be very damaging. It can be very risky. We have tons of examples in the history of medicine, also more contemporary ones. Thalidomide, right, a drug that was used not that long ago is an example of this. And then, of course, we have wild successes. Scientists have used causal explanations to eradicate certain diseases from the human planet. Smallpox is an example of a disease, right, that's been eradicated from the human population, right, on the basis of having a causal explanation that is principled in various types of ways. So part of what we see here are two main topics of interest, reasons for why they matter. Part of what I'm going to focus on in my talk today is explanatory relevance and giving us an analysis of explanatory relevance that captures its principled nature for a particular kind of causal explanation and exploring the principles behind determinations of explanatory relevance in ways that can help us out with these types of debates, these types of puzzles. They can help us with various disagreements that are showing up in the context of considering what details are explanatory and aren't for a particular target of interest. So with this background in mind, the plan for the rest of my talk today will take three main steps. The first step will involve giving a bit more background on explanatory relevance. It's a topic that philosophers have discussed. What have they said? How do these accounts deliver? How do they kind of struggle to deliver here? Second, what I'll do is I'll provide an account of explanatory relevance in terms of control. This is something that's been discussed, but what will be given in a bit more detail is the suggestion that when scientists are selecting explanatory causes, they're selecting causes that give particular kinds of control. I'll suggest what I take these to be for a certain class of cases. They're looking for causes that give you minimal control, ideal control, and then more control over the explanatory target. In the third and final part of this talk, I'll conclude by discussing the role of philosophy in these discussions, in these debates, in particular bringing us back to science communication, scientific standards, and interdisciplinary work. Starting things off here first with a little bit more background. In discussing scientific explanation, it is sometimes helpful to introduce a model, common in philosophy, where we break it up into two main elements. First element of a scientific explanation is our explanatory target. This is what we want to explain, right? What a scientist wants to explain in a particular context. Fancy philosophical term we have for this, of course, is explanandum. I gave various examples of what are examples of explanatory targets in the life sciences: measles in the human population, differences in fruit fly eye color, firing of neurons. When we think of this explanatory target in philosophy, we often view it as something that can be phrased in terms of a why question. So a scientist is studying some system and they form a why question about a property or a phenomenon of interest. So they might ask a question like, why does this group of individuals have measles as opposed to not having measles? The why question helps capture a contrastive focus, which is one of the things that we often think you need for a well-defined explanatory target. Interesting to think of various standards that need to be met to have a well-defined explanatory target. It's often viewed that this is a sort of easy step, but I think there are actually standards to consider and specify that capture the types of why questions that are appropriate, right? Or that are clear enough to even go on to pursue what's going to explain this target of interest. So this is our first element, right? Before we can go give an explanation, it needs to be very clear exactly what it is we want to explain. Second main element, what does the explanatory work? We refer to this, of course, as the explanans. A helpful way to think about this is that giving an explanation is providing an answer to that why question. Here, as I mentioned, we're focused on causal explanation. And so we often think of these, of course, as involving an appeal to the causes that are responsible for the target. Scientists are appealing to typically many causes when they're giving causal explanations. Here I'm showing us at least one main cause that figures in these explanations. Explaining measles involves appealing to a virus and many other factors. Fruit fly eye color, gene variants, and many other factors. Neural firing, right? At least at the very upstream part of this, neurotransmitters or some kind of excitatory stimulus. What we're interested in here when it comes to explanatory relevance is all of these factors that a scientist is citing when they're giving an explanation, right? Causal and other types of detail. When we look at an example like measles, part of what we see is there are many factors, causal factors, that are showing up in a scientific explanation of this type of outcome. Gene variants, immune cells, cellular receptors, there's physiological systems that are all impacted by this replication of viruses. They might also cite socioeconomic factors, maybe in explaining distribution of this disease in a population. One thing to note about causal explanations in these life science contexts is that scientists are very selective about which details they view as explanatory. There are all sorts of details that they don't cite in their explanation. Examples of this? Well, they're not citing the color of the patient's socks when they're explaining measles. They're not going to cite dietary intake of broccoli, right? They don't care about these when they're giving an explanation of measles. They're also not citing factors like the Big Bang or factors at lower scales of fundamental physics. These aren't showing up in explanations of measles. These might seem like more silly philosophical examples. We can give examples that seem more serious and more scientific if we consider other types of factors. In particular, if you think of a scientist who's interested in explaining one of these types of outcomes of interest, it's important to appreciate that they're facing a situation of massive complexity, right? It is a mess out there. There are tons of details that they need to consider, and there are tons of details that they're excluding from their explanations. So consider that with respect to just a single cell, there's going to be over 25,000 genes, over 10,000 proteins, millions of molecules, trillions of atoms. That's just at the scale of a single cell. This increases dramatically when you look at multicellular organisms, and even more when you include the environment. Scientists have to manage this kind of complexity when they're giving a causal explanation, right? And somehow they're doing this very successfully with respect to the factors that they are including in their explanations. How are they doing this, right? This is very impressive. This is very fascinating. And by various standards like prediction, inferences that generalize, they're very successful. So part of what we want to know is how are they doing this? What are the principled reasons and the kind of principles that they're using to guide this selection process? We want to know how they're doing this in order to examine the scientific standards that we have, in order to inform science communication, and also to get guidance in future cases, right? Scientists are still working to give explanations of outcomes that remain less well understood. As I mentioned, there are various philosophical accounts that attempt to answer this question of explanatory relevance and how we do or how we should make this determination. When philosophers have focused on this question of explanatory relevance and what details are explanatory, there are a number of answers that they've given. One is, well, what details are explanatory? A, all of the details. B, the details that an audience needs or that they find satisfying. And C, the real causal structure of the world. When it comes to the very first of these responses, we see examples of this in the work of Lewis and Railton, where it's been suggested that explanations should include the biggest chunk of explanatory information. So for both of these philosophers, explanatory relevant information goes all the way back in the causal history, and it's going to go all the way down to lower scales of physics. Giving an explanation should include all of that detail, or at least it gets better with the more detail that you include. Lewis suggests that this detail is infinite. They also acknowledge that no one could actually give all of this detail, but it is an ideal, and they stick firm to this view of how explanations work. What's also interesting about this position is they suggest that any selection of some of these details as the more important or the more explanatory ones is subjective, it's unprincipled, and there's all sorts of words that they use to suggest that it's not rigorous, right? It's invidious, it's capricious, you name it. So it might be the case that a scientist is doing that, or we're doing it in everyday life, but they don't think it's guided by a principled rationale. I do think it's guided by a principled rationale, and I'll suggest what that is later on in this talk. With respect to this first position, one of the challenges that it faces is that it provides a pretty impractical way of thinking about and capturing scientific explanation, right? It's hard to see how this could be implemented in any kind of scientific context. Relatedly, it also makes scientific explanation seem kind of impossible, because if you walk into the clinic and ask the physician why you have COVID, they're going to need to cite factors all the way back to the Big Bang. It isn't clear that you could ever give a scientific explanation on this type of framework or what it would look like. An additional challenge for this account is that it's not capturing scientific work. It's not capturing how scientists actually do give explanations and how they're reasoning. And if we think they're successful with respect to certain goals, that should be something that we care about. So this is an approach to thinking about explanation that's very distant from and not informed by explanatory practice in science. You could say the same for how we give explanations in everyday life. Second position here, this is a suggestion that you find in the work of Potocznik, Achenstein, and other philosophers. The suggestion here is that the selection of explanatory relevant detail is guided by the details that an audience needs or that they find satisfying. They suggest that explanation is at root an act of communication. I think this account is important for thinking about science communication. I think it's not helpful for thinking about the standards that need to be met to know that you have a good explanation or not. Let me unpack this a little bit. A first challenge for this account is that, again, it struggles to capture scientific work. When scientists are studying and when they come up with an explanation for measles in the human population, they don't think that that explanation is going to differ depending on the audience who hears it. They might need to communicate it differently, but they don't think that what details are giving the explanation are going to differ based on the audience. Other ways to see challenges for these types of accounts are that they're going to include bad explanations because many bad explanations can be quite satisfying to different audiences, right? 5G wireless networks explaining COVID is very satisfying for a number of audiences. If we look back in the history of medicine, we see many types of disease theories that were very satisfying and very popular: miasmatic, humoral, and so on. Right, so this is going to kind of include bad explanations when they're satisfying to different audiences. On the flip side, it's going to exclude good explanations. If you gave me an explanation from physics, it's unlikely that I would find it very satisfying, probably because I don't have the expertise to kind of capture the key concepts and key terms in that explanation. I do think that the focus on an audience is important for the communication aspect. The suggestion here is you don't want to hook up audience satisfaction to scientific standards. So keeping separate the kind of standards that make something explanatory from then actually being good at communicating that to various audiences. Third, the real causal structure of the world. Here's a quote from Craver's book. Good neuroscientific explanations are distinguished from bad, not by features of an inference, but by the fact that good explanations accurately describe the causal structure of the world, right? In other cases, of course, there are other types of status terms that are used to capture the kind of causal structure that's viewed as explanatorily relevant. Obviously, mechanism is coming up quite a bit in his work and other philosophers' works. One of the challenges for projects that fall into this third category is they can be a kind of non-answer in various places. They sometimes use a fancy word or a kind of status word that rephrases the question, right? They can kind of kick the can down the road in the sense that they tell you that you need causal detail, but they're not really telling you what kind of causal detail you need, right? And that's what we want to know. So the suggestion is you need detail that's mechanistic. How do we find that? What is that, right? Or you need detail that captures, the accurate causal structure. Well, what is that? Another way to kind of see how these could be viewed as a non-answer is if a scientist asks you, how do I know whether the causes I have here are explanatory for my target? And you say, well, find the mechanism, or, accurately describe the causal structure, then they'll be like, well, how do I do that, right? So sometimes there are examples that fall into this third kind of category that can be a kind of non-answer. A positive way to suggest what we want out of this question of what details are explanatory, ideally, is a concrete answer, one that captures standards that are found in successful scientific practice, right? And ones that we can also use to guide future work, right? Future scientific work. Part of what I'm going to suggest in the rest of this talk is an analysis or a way of thinking about explanatory relevance that builds on literature in the field that focuses on the view that explanations provide information about control. I'm going to focus in particular on causal explanations and in biology and neuroscience, and I'll further focus on examples that are coming more from molecular and cellular contexts. So here are examples like explanations for lac operon gene expression, neural firing, fruit fly eye color, various types of human diseases. I think of these as capturing a kind of traditional explanatory target. Here I'm actually going to be focused on a binary target. You can think of the kind of on-off of the outcome here. There are all types of explanatory targets in the life sciences that I think differ from these, right? In system sciences, we have unique types of explanatory targets. I'm focusing us in here on a particular kind. And here's what I'm going to suggest. One helpful way to think about explanatory practice for these types of targets is first, scientists specify an explanandum of interest. They first specify what they want to explain. They anchor this and they fix this, and then they use it to search for the causal and other types of detail that are relevant to and that are going to explain this target. How do they do this? I'm going to suggest that they do this in a manner that involves searching for and selecting causes on the basis of whether they provide information about control over that target. It isn't just any type of control that they're interested in. I'm going to introduce 3 control criteria that guide how they select the causes that they view as explanatory. They're going to, I suggest, select causes that meet 3 standards: minimal control, ideal control, and more control. Before I discuss these in more detail, here are examples of the types of cases that I'm thinking of. What's interesting is that scientists often use a kind of diagram when they're giving explanations of these types of targets, and the diagram is often highlighting the main causes that figure in their causal explanation. As I mentioned earlier, there's a number of interesting features of both their verbal explanations for these types of outcomes and also their diagrams of the main causes. Right? One of them is they are very selective about what details they view as explanatory. There are a very select set of causes that they cite in their explanations. They are very choosy and they are very picky about what counts. Second, if you look at all of these cases and if you look at their more verbal and textual explanations, they have some kind of upstream starting point that has either one main cause or a set. There's a set of causal intermediates, and then there's a final outcome of interest. That final outcome is their effect, what they want to explain. When they give you an explanation, they often tell a story. They, maybe unsurprisingly, start at the beginning with those upstream causes, and then they discuss these intermediates along the way that the upstream causes impact until they lead you to the very end. Right, so one of the questions is, how do they do this? How are they selecting these details as explanatory, and are they doing it in a principled way? I'm going to suggest that they are doing it in a principled way, and that in these cases, we can see the implementation of these control criteria. So let's start things off with the example of measles again. Our explanatory target is Y. It's captured with the variable Y. Here we're interested in the contrastive focus of measles presence and absence, and this will be in the human population. Right, so this is what a scientist wants to explain. This is their explanatory target. One of the things I mentioned is that after specifying an explanatory target of interest, there's a ton of causal and other detail that they need to consider, right? It's a total mess out there in terms of all of the details that could be explanatorily relevant, and right now they don't know which ones are and which ones aren't, right? So how do they do this? How do they figure out which details to cite in their explanation? Well, part of what they do first is they have a kind of initial standard where they're searching for causes that give them minimal control over the on-off of this explanatory target of interest. They often refer to various screening experiments, which I think well capture the implementation of this kind of standard. They're essentially searching for factors such that if those factors were manipulated, they would give you some control over this explanatory target of interest. This first standard is very much motivated by an interventionist account of causation. What we're doing is we're plugging in our explanatory target to the effect. So we think about a hypothetical intervention where you think of hypothetically intervening on one of these candidates, changing its values, and you want to see, does it give you any control, right, over your explanatory target of interest? This doesn't require that scientists have a way to physically manipulate a candidate cause. They just need to be able to have some evidence about what would happen if they were to manipulate it. Happy to say more about that if there's interest, but part of what you can see here is they're just looking for the presence of some kind of change in the outcome with a toggling of their candidate cause. So if you think of toggling, changing the measles virus, right? If you change whether someone is exposed to this virus or not, that is definitely going to give you some control over the presence and absence of this disease, right? So in order for a cause to be included in an explanation, it's got to pass this first test. It needs to give you at least some control over your explanatory target. There's two main purposes and kind of roles that this first standard plays. First, it's going to allow scientists to include causes that they're going to keep pursuing in their explanatory inquiry. And importantly, it's going to allow them to rule out a ton of stuff. A lot of factors are not going to meet this standard. This is going to be a way for them to narrow the search space dramatically, which is very useful for them. In order to see the kind of power of the standard, even though it's only requiring a kind of limited type of control, we can look at a number of cases where it helps us understand the kind of explanatory reasoning that scientists are engaged in this space. So how is this standard powerful? Is it powerful? Is it useful? How does it help? I'm going to suggest that this standard is a kind of rationale that's being used to narrow the search space and to show why all sorts of factors are not explanatory. So let's take a look at a simple example, a complex example, and then a really interesting puzzle and confusion that really disturbs philosophers and scientists. So first case, we want to explain measles in the human population. What about factors like the patient wearing lucky socks, the rose bushes outside near the patient, or 5G wireless networks? The way that we think about these factors and whether they're explanatory is we consider a hypothetical manipulation of each of these candidate causes, right? We want to see, is it going to control our outcome? So you think of a hypothetical experiment, right? We can do that with a number of these. And then we want to see, is it giving us minimal control over this very precise target of interest? Now, we can perform an experiment with lucky socks. What we'll find is, unfortunately, they give no control over the presence and absence of measles in the patient, right? Same with rose bushes, same with 5G wireless networks. In fact, that's going to help capture why 5G wireless networks don't cause or explain measles and also COVID. They give you no control over this explanatory target. You probably already thought that these factors didn't cause or explain this disease, so let's look at a more complex example, right? One that philosophers can lose sleep over. So here we're going to consider details that go far back in the causal history of an outcome, like the Big Bang, or factors down at lower scales of physics. Again, in order to consider whether these are explanatory, we can consider a hypothetical experiment that changes the candidate cause. So with respect to the Big Bang, we can consider, whether the Big Bang had happened or not. And That's not going to give us control over this very narrow target of interest. It might control whether humans exist on the planet or not, but it isn't giving us control over the fine-grained target of whether patients have measles or don't have measles, right? So it isn't going to pass this test of giving us minimal control over presence and absence of measles in the human population. And this is going to capture why it's not included in these causal explanations. Same with factors at lower scales of fundamental physics, right? It's appreciated that if you go to lower scales, right, there you will find different types of chemical, atomic, and other entities. No one is denying that there is the presence of these factors at lower scales. What's being denied is that they're explanatory for this type of target of interest. So we can think of various manipulations of atomic details, right? But our best understanding in physics suggests that if you were to manipulate those factors, they don't give you control over whether a patient gets measles or doesn't get measles. One way I sometimes characterize this is by suggesting that explanation isn't a game of how low you can go, but what gives you control. And sometimes the factors that give you better control over your explanatory target are at a higher scale, right? And in this case, a virus is going to be a factor that gives us better control over this explanatory target. And again, we're not denying a kind of basic notion of physicalism. That stuff is there. The question is whether it's explanatory or not. This is capturing why it's not viewed as explanatory. It doesn't meet minimal control. Okay, puzzle and confusion. There's a really interesting confusion or puzzle in both philosophy and in science about necessary factors, or what are sometimes called necessary causes. It is sometimes suggested that if a factor is necessary for an outcome, that it's automatically explanatory for the outcome, right? Doesn't seem terrible until we start to see some claims that it leads scientists and philosophers to make. One example of this is I had a physician and medical scientist tell me that one of the causes of lung cancer is having lungs. Now, you might see how this kind of claim could happen, which is that having lungs is necessary for getting lung cancer, but this seems like there's a kind of problem here, right, with this causal and explanatory claim. Part of what it does is it makes it sound like if we had just not had lungs in the first place, we wouldn't have had lung cancer. That isn't correct. If you didn't have lungs, you wouldn't be alive. So what's going on with this kind of case and with this kind of puzzle? A first thing to point out is that we want to explain this disease outcome, presence and absence, in patients that have lungs already. And so you assume that they have lungs. In fact, you're going to assume all sorts of necessary factors for life because you want to explain the presence and absence of a disease phenotype in living humans, right? So there's all sorts of factors that are assumed in the background. You can also kind of see this with measles. We assume the patient's got oxygen. We assume the patient has food. You could intervene on those and it will control something, but it's going to kill the patient. So it controls whether they're alive or dead. It doesn't control this fine-grained, precise target. One thing that's happening here is there's a strategy scientists are using to help them out in managing complexity, and it's capturing a very narrow explanatory target. So it's going to narrow the types of causes that are relevant in explaining that outcome of interest. So first kind of issue, right, there's a lot of factors that we have in the background. Second, if you think of this change having lungs, not having lungs, it doesn't give you minimal control over the target of interest. In fact, if we start thinking a little bit more like scientists and just setting up a kind of hypothetical experiment of the candidate factors, it's unlikely that we would kind of make this claim in the first place. It wouldn't be a variable that we would view as a candidate. What's going on here how are we kind of thinking about this minimal control feature and what is it doing for us? One thing that we can suggest at this point is that these are all capturing a way that causal explanations can be bad. So one way for a causal explanation to be bad is to cite factors that fail minimal control. They don't give you any control over your explanatory target of interest. This matters for science communication. It also matters for the standards that we have in science for our causal and explanatory standards, right? In particular, necessity is not going to be a good standard for picking out factors that are causes that explain outcomes. There's a little bit of irony in this example, partly because, and this was discussed at dinner last night, sometimes it's common for scientists to be a bit dismissive of philosophers, philosophers of science. Sometimes it's suggested that the scientist kind of knows the science better than the philosopher. And part of what we see in these cases is the presence of causation puzzles that can really confuse, right, all sorts of people. In a case where you might have a physician or a scientist, but who's saying something that isn't well capturing the standards of science and is going to be super confusing if we're communicating it to the public, right? Things like having lungs as a cause of lung cancer. So support for interdisciplinary approaches, getting multiple people in the room and kind of carefully thinking about these places where we can all get stuck, right? And how to get unstuck. Minimal control is the first standard. Minimal control identifies causes that provide partial explanations. Once you've captured causes that meet this standard, you're on your way to getting an explanation. If you don't, you've got bad explanations. That's a suggestion. Scientists don't just want causes with some control. They're going to want causes with very particular kinds of control. Better explanations cite causes with ideal control. One way to see this is in lots of somewhat more recent work in philosophy that captures the sense in which causes aren't equal. There are very different types of causes that we're interested in science and in everyday life. You see this in the distinctions that scientists make among types of causes. Scientists will refer to causes as proximal or distal. They can be deterministic or probabilistic. Mike Anderson and other philosophers have looked at cases where causes are constraints, right? These are all terms and labels that are capturing very different types of causes. I think of a lot of these as involving secondary features of causation. They don't tell you whether you have a cause or not. They tell you what kind you have, right? So there's different types of causes. One very important philosophical project is to capture what types these are and how to very clearly, kind of rigorously distinguish them. In these scientific contexts and in everyday life, we tend to view causes as more explanatory when they have certain features. I'm going to suggest that there's 3 features that these causes typically have. They are strong, they're stable, and they're fast. Or if a cause maxes out on strength and stability and speed, we think it is more explanatory. So let's look at an example that shows us these distinctions. We can look again at the measles virus and the measles disease outcome. And part of what we can see is this is a cause that doesn't just give minimal control. It's going to give very particular types of control that's strong, stable, and fast. So strength here refers to a cause that is very highly probability boosting for its effect. Sometimes scientists will refer to these as deterministic causes. It boosts the probability of its effect to a very high degree. We view these as paradigmatic causes. We think they're great. We think they're ideal. Sometimes they're called perfect. So a way to think about strong causes is in this probability boosting sense. There are causes that don't max out on strength. Causes can be weak. Think of taking a drug that reduces headache, but it only does it some of the time, right? It doesn't do it all of the time. it's not as strong as the causal relationship between this virus and measles. So some causes can be weak just in the sense that they don't boost the probability of their effects to a high degree. Second, stability. What it means for a cause to be stable is that the relationship between the cause and the effect holds across a wide range of background conditions. This is sometimes referred to as generalizable. So in the case of this virus and measles, it's a causal relationship that holds across changes in the genes of different patients, changes in their diet, changes in their exercise, changes in their age. You almost don't need to pay attention as much to these factors because the virus will produce measles in all of these contexts, or many of them. So what it means to say that a cause is stable is just that it's going to hold across a wide range of changes in background conditions. Causes don't always have this feature. An example of a cause that's less stable is if this pill causes headache relief just in children, but it doesn't also work in adults. Still a cause, it's just less stable. Third is speed. We often privilege and value causes that are very fast. We have a kind of bias in favor of causes that produce their effect on shorter time scales, right? So in the context of measles, this virus is producing the disease in a time frame that we kind of expect. If it produced the disease in a time frame beyond the human lifespan, of course, we wouldn't even talk about it. These are three features of causes that you also find studied in the context of cognitive science, where you have scientists studying different features that humans kind of privilege in their causal reasoning and causal explanations they provide. Part of what I'm suggesting here is that after searching for factors that give minimal control, scientists are searching for special causes that give more ideal types of control. They often start their explanation with causes that max out on these features. It could be one, like the virus in the case of measles, or they can have multiple causes that they need to give them causes that offer ideal control, right? Control that's stronger, that's more stable, and that's fast. It makes sense that scientists privilege causes with these features. They're incredibly valuable, right? If you have a cause that is strong, stable, and fast, or maxes out on these, right? These come in a continuum. It is incredibly useful for treatment, prevention, for cure of diseases, for making predictions, for making inferences that generalize, right? These are incredibly useful for the goals that we associate with explanation. The suggestion here is that one way to understand the sense in which they're more explanatory is they kind of give you more control. Causes with ideal control. What's interesting is here we see another place where we sometimes slip up in how we think about these features and the standards that are suggested in science. Sometimes scientists suggest that these are features that you have to have for something to count as a cause at all. And that's a case where you have standards that are too high. So one example of this is I had a scientist tell me that causes are factors that always produce their effects. So that's a claim that causes are factors that are very strong and that are very stable. If we maintain that causes are factors that always produce their effects, we're going to find very few causes because they don't all max out. They don't always produce their effects, right? We're also going to have a hard time saying that smoking is a cause of lung cancer, right? We're going to have a really hard time talking about climate change because the causes of that are super slow, right? Now, it's also important to capture the sense in which we shouldn't always maybe privilege causes with these features, but the point here is that it's fine to prioritize causes with these features, right, when they're useful. It's not fine to view these as a standard for causation. All causes don't need to meet these features. Slow causes are real causes. Weak causes are real causes. These are distinctions within causation, right? Part of what we're seeing here is a philosophical framework for capturing these distinctions, right? It's another place where I think philosophers can be useful in suggesting sometimes we're specifying our standards in science in a way that is way too high, right? All causes don't need to meet these features. Maybe causes that are more explanatory in some contexts do. Okay, so we had minimal control, we had ideal control. Better explanations cite causes with ideal control, but they also cite causes that provide more control. So this is going to be the final standard that I discuss here. The suggestion is once a scientist has fixed that explanatory target and they've kind of identified a starting point for their explanation, they're also interested in filling in the intermediates in between both of these points. And this is going to give them a better explanation in the sense that they're identifying more places where you can get control over the outcome of interest, right? So including more causes along the way, more of these causal intermediates, gives them a better explanation on the grounds that they provide more places for control over the outcome. Sometimes actually intervening on that upstream cause is more difficult, and we might want some kind of drug or other intervention that's targeting an intermediate. How much of this detail they need to include is going to be determined by the level at which they've characterized the explanatory target and the starting cause. So that's going to give them stopping rules for how much detail they need to include. The intermediate causes are going to need to be proportional and at the same level as their explanatory target and as their starting cause or their starting causes. You can also see how with this intermediate detail, they're able to give more of that how explanation. If you just have the upstream causes and the downstream effect, you can explain that. They cause and explain the downstream target. Here, the intermediates are telling you how. How is it the case that this virus causes measles? Well, here we'll go through the intermediates along the way. So they can answer more how questions, right? Or they can answer a how question in the first place by giving this intermediate detail. And here, this is going to allow them to give a more complete explanation. Okay. In summary, number of the suggestions here, explanatory relevance is a project, is something that matters for many different types of projects, right? As I mentioned, capturing standards in science, for clearly communicating these standards to the public and other audiences, science communication, and for making sure that we're using the outputs of science in ways that have positive impact in different contexts. There have been philosophical attempts to address this topic of explanatory relevance, and a number of them I've suggested fall short, right? So we looked at these full detail accounts, audience relative accounts, and then appeals to causal structure. But it's also just challenging for scientists and philosophers to specify what the standards are in science, right? What the causal and explanatory standards are. And we can see places where there are attempts to give these standards, but they're not yet delivering exactly what we want them to, right? In some cases, the standards remain ambiguous, where we have a kind of status term, but it's defined in different ways by different scientific groups, and there isn't a kind of consensus on how that term is used or how exactly to implement that standard. In other cases, we have places where the standards are specified in ways that are far too low. They can, in this case, over-include factors that won't be explanatory for our target of interest. The example that I gave here is necessity. Necessity isn't a good standard for explanatory relevance. There's lots of factors that will be necessary for our outcome, and that doesn't mean that they're going to explain it. And then a third kind of example I gave are cases where standards are specified, but here they're not too low, they're way too high. The suggestion here is that we have examples of attempts to specify causal standards that are too high that expect causes to max out on strength, stability, and speed to count as causes in the first place, right? Where instead we should think of these as capturing types of causes and features that you can kind of dial up and dial down. Some causes have more of this kind of feature, some causes have less. In conclusion, part of what I have suggested here is a way to think about explanatory relevance in terms of control criteria. The suggestion is that this can give us a more kind of clear and concrete standard for thinking about and for unpacking explanatory relevance. The suggestion is explanations provide information about control. And in these cases of causal explanations in biology and neuroscience, we see an interest in identifying causes that give very particular kinds of control: minimal control, ideal control, and more control. I think this framework can give us guidance in thinking about future cases, but it also helps capture why our other kind of answers were problematic in cases where we've kind of gone off the rails, and why we have bad explanations with respect to those other examples. I think it's a very important time for philosophers and scientists to engage with these topics, right? We have in the US a Secretary of Health and Human Services who is an anti-vaccine activist, conspiracy theorist who refers to miasmas in explaining diseases, RFK. We have discussions of 5G wireless networks as explaining COVID. We have lots of vaccine hesitancy. Part of what's sometimes suggested is that these attempts at giving explanations don't capture fundamental principles of science. Now, I think they don't, but we need to clearly specify how they don't and why they don't. And this is often non-trivial, partly because capturing the standards is difficult, but there's also this communication piece. Once we do capture them, we need to be able to communicate them clearly to each other in science or in academic contexts, but to many other audiences, right, including public audiences. I think we need and are well served with an interdisciplinary approach with respect to these topics. Philosophers need to attend to scientific reasoning, right? Successful scientific practice. And then it's helpful for scientists to explore the implications of their claims, potential issues that they have, right? With this kind of focus on interdisciplinary aspects and engagement, I think we can be well set up and supported in getting clear science communication, in working to specify these fundamental principles of science, and in the project of distinguishing explanations that are good and bad and better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are going to do things in a bit of a different order here, so I'm so sorry. Bear with me. Thank you so much, Dr. Ross. Lauren Ross is a Dean's Professor and Chancellor's Fellow in the Department of Logic and Philosophy of Science at the University of California, Irvine. Her research focuses on explanation in the biological and biomedical sciences, with particular attention to causal reasoning, causal selection, causal constraints, and complexity in scientific practice. Dr. Ross received her PhD in History and Philosophy of Science from the University of Pittsburgh, her MA in Bioethics from Pitt's Center for Bioethics and Health Law, and her MD from the University of California, Irvine. She is the author of Explanation in Biology, published through Cambridge University Press, which develops a systematic account of explanatory patterns in the life sciences and examines how biologists justify causal claims. Her work has appeared in leading journals including Philosophy of Science, the British Journal for Philosophy of Science, and Synthesis. Her collaborative article with co-keynote speaker Danny S. Bassett, Causation in Neuroscience, Keeping Mechanism Meaningful, appeared in Nature Reviews Neuroscience and was really key to developing the theme of this conference. So now on to questions and answers, and I see there are already some hands up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Russ. Really enjoyed your talk. Um, I think I'm fully on board with, with your argumentation. Um, especially when it comes to like science communication. If you want to be a relativist about it, I think that wouldn't cut the crisis of public trust in science. You actually need a philosophically minded person to tell you, well, actually, I'm objectively talking about something, and I have a good account of a robust philosophical account of what is good explanation, and saying 5G wouldn't mean anything here. So that's great. But I wonder if we go a little bit more philosophical. I think in one of their uh, encounters between Woodward and Nancy Cartwright, Cartwright kind of leveled this criticism that focusing too much on intervention, manipulation, and control is kind of turning science into this. I think her term was monotonism or one uni criteria view of science. It seems to me there are so many questions in science, especially in biological sciences, that we still could get something, a theoretical fruit like better understanding a system, a phenomena, without actually being able to do any meaningful intervention. One example that is kind of more intuitive for me is like the case of language. We could say a good explanation about language is one that is fast, stable, and strong. And then we have to go and look at the behavioral and learning experiences. So any good explanation and theoretical approach to language should very much highlight the role of learning, linguistic learning. And then we have a school of linguistics that really kind of not overemphasize learning, and it goes for the Chomskyan school. It just has different view, and it gives us a theoretical understanding and deeper understanding of the phenomena, but there is no meaningful way in which you could get a fast, stable intervention. So if we go with your account, do we end up saying, forget about more theoretical biolinguistic accounts of language, let's focus on those schools of uh, linguistics thinking that are more behavioral or behavior oriented? Does that follow from your account, or there is a way to say, well, when it comes to the more theoretical aspects of our sciences, we could be considering other theoretical virtues of a theory. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You heard me emphasize at a number of points that this is on causal explanation in neuroscience and biology, in molecular and cellular context, and that's on purpose because I think, I mean, if you look at the other philosophical attempts to capture explanatory relevance, or sometimes philosophers who want to tell you what all explanations are like, that's very hard to do, and often it's not going to work out too well, at least I would say. So in this case, I really do want this framework to be motivated by a certain class of cases, and I think there are other explanations in the life sciences that won't fit this picture. And this is for causal explanation. I don't even think all explanations are causal. So this book distinguishes accounts of causal explanation and non-causal explanation. I'm a pluralist when it comes to there being different types of explanation, causal, non-causal, open to others too. I also do want to keep the guardrails on though, because I don't want an anything goes kind of pluralism. Otherwise, someone might say, well, 5G wireless networks is what's wrong with, so there are guardrails on it. And that's partly what I'm working to do here with causal explanation in this context, is to say, here's when it doesn't count, here's when you're starting to get it, here's when it gets better. And arguably, that's also one difficulty of some of the mechanistic accounts. If you can't tell me what doesn't count as a mechanism, then it's probably not a super useful concept yet, or at least, right, if you do have a useful account or concept, it's helpful to say what doesn't count. So there are many different types of explanation, in my view. You can categorize them in these bigger categories of causal, non-causal, and then there's different types in those categories. But we do have to say what counts and what doesn't count. I think what's sometimes unhelpful is philosophers working on explanation will sometimes say, this is the most important thing that scientists do. Explanation is the primary objective of science. That was Nagel. Hempel says similar types of things. Scientists are not just interested in explanation. This is just one thing they do. They want descriptions, they want classifications, they want predictions, and those can all be super different from explanation. So I don't think it's helpful to suggest that it's the only thing scientists are up to. I also don't think it's helpful to say it's the most important thing. I don't know why we would ever need to say that. I mean, it's hard to give explanations. We think of it as giving a deeper understanding of a system, but I think it's helpful to capture these distinctions, and that's part of what I'm up to. One way to do that is also to kind of narrow the context of interest. And then just one other thing to say when it comes to different questions in science, which came up in your question and has come up in many of the great talks at this workshop, is when the scientists can ask a different question about measles. There's not one explanatory why question. So you see socioeconomic factors aren't showing up in this narrow binary target, but if you want to ask about the distribution of measles in a population, that's another valid type of explanatory why question. It picks out different causal factors. So one thing that isn't always appreciated in philosophical accounts is that you can ask many different types of questions about what we think of as the same property in the world. And when you ask a different question, different causal and other types of detail matter. Sometimes philosophers talk about the one or whole explanation of measles or the property. And I don't think that well captures the more piecemeal or kind of question relative way that explanations work. So this is another way where you could ask different questions about measles and they require different explanations. And that captures another kind of maybe nuance and diversity.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a question. I'm not sure it's very well formed, but it's sort of like an echo of a very old sort of question, which is whether control is our ability to control something or control is a feature of the world itself, like one phenomenon controls another. And specifically, just to quickly say where this is coming from, I think in the notion of ideal control with speed or with fast causes, we had the idea that a fast cause is one that acts like within a desired time frame. And so this is a very sort of like pragmatic, what can we do with it aspect of that. But then with the notion of a minimal cause, it seemed, and I don't know if I'm interpreting you right, but it seemed like when you said hypothetical manipulations or like a hypothetical that shows us that one thing controls another is also sufficient. And so then it seems like cause is something that's in the phenomena themselves and not in our actual ability to deal with them.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. There's a sense in which when you're talking about interventions or an interventionist account of causation, there's sort of two places where you could talk about control. One of them is you're talking about a hypothetical manipulation of some candidate cause. So scientists talk about perturbation experiments or manipulation experiments. Here's what they're manipulating, and they want to see if it gives control. And so it can get a little less clear. So for me, I'm talking about the features of this causal relationship here. And this is something that you get information about by either directly performing a perturbation on the candidate cause, hopefully with an ideal, unconfounded experimental manipulation. We can't always do that. So sometimes we just have evidence or we have other methods that give us information about what would happen to this effect if I manipulated this drug. So another way to put it is, suppose there's two drugs and this one works in like 2 minutes and this one works in like 2 hours. That's a feature of those causes in the world. If they have a similar effect, then a physician can choose this drug if they want this control that's quicker, or they can choose this one. But the control that that cause has is sort of an objective feature of that cause in the world. We don't get to choose that secondary feature of how fast it is, but we can pick one over the other depending on what kind of control we want. But just like you're mentioning, we sometimes can maybe be less clear in this space because there's technically control here. Well, and this is what I'm focused on, but then the perturbation experiments is also a perturbation or a manipulation where you could talk about control there too. But yeah, this is the control that I'm focused on here. So we're getting information about whether a candidate cause gives control over the effect, and then just what kind, what are the features of that control?
Hi.
Oh, hey, Dan.
Thank you so much. I don't know if this is out of scope. Vaccines don't cause autism. Explain that. Or is there a difference, or is it in scope to think about explaining a non-cause or a lack of causation?
Can you repeat the very first thing you said?
Vaccines do not cause autism.
Oh, there was something before that, no?
Oh, I said I didn't know if you would consider this to be out of scope with respect to this
okay.
project.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is that causal claim or denial of a causal claim? What's the question?
The question is what does this project have to say about trying to assert maybe the lack of a causal relationship?
Yeah. In order for something to count as a cause, it needs to give you minimal control under a hypothetical manipulation. So vaccines don't cause autism. Vaccines aren't a factor that you could manipulate to control whether someone gets autism or not.
Right. And I think that would require some, like, a different kind of explanation, maybe. And maybe it's not an accident that the conspiracy theories that we say are often in the negative and therefore often really hard to prove. I imagine that's not an accident. But I was just trying to think about whether what your project here might offer us if, with my public health hat on, and you're talking about, like, we don't think 5G causes, we know that 5G doesn't cause COVID. How would we explain our evidence rationale, however you want to put it, that is the case?
So I think there's two things at least. One of them is what we want evidence for, and the other is the evidence. I can tell you what we want evidence for. The evidence gets more complicated. We want evidence for minimal control. That's what we want evidence for. There's all sorts of, and in this framework, it's evidence for minimal control that also assumes you're ruling out confounders with an ideal unconfounded manipulation, right? So there's a lot to unpack in terms of getting evidence for that kind of feature. So yeah, I mean, I think it can be complicated in part because scientists don't have one method for getting information about causation. Their gold standard method, randomized clinical trials and that like pyramid of,
Don't get me started.
this is the pyramid. Okay, yeah. So, they often suggest that the gold standard for causal evidence is a randomized clinical trial. I mean, they can't perform that in tons of cases where they want to make causal claims, and they make causal claims with other types of methods that aren't like that at all. And there's various assumptions that go into it. So, before they could ever manipulate genes, they made claims that genes causally produced phenotypes. And they had information that if you were to perturb the gene, it would control the effect. So I mean, I don't know how helpful it is, but I do think that in order for something to count as a cause, it does need to give you minimal control. It's harder to specify when we have evidence for that and when we don't. Obviously, there's tons of challenges also with just specifying these explanatory targets in medicine too. How do you know when you have found, the category of autism is very complicated in all sorts of ways. And yeah, confounding becomes challenging too. But yeah, it's minimal control would be the kind of feature here that I would specify, but the evidence piece, I need you to join the conversation. I think that gets more complicated.
Thank you.
Awesome talk. I hope this case is within the scope of your project. So let me know if it's not. But I was thinking about cases where it seems like we have something like control, but maybe not an explanation. And I'm thinking of something like SSRIs, where we get control over depression in some sense, and we think, oh, okay, well, the cause must be some serotonergic mechanisms, and like so I guess one way to think about this case is, okay, well, actually we have a pretty good explanation, and maybe the current looking at other kinds of explanations is just because we have found more stable control elsewhere. Or maybe you might think like, well, actually we didn't have ideal control to begin with there, and that's why we're not looking at that as a potential explanation anymore. I was wondering what your thoughts were on a case like this, where maybe we have control but it's not quite through the right causes for an explanation.
Good. No, I think that's a really nice example. Is this suggestion that we don't have a full explanation for depression, even though SSRI meds or other meds can give us some control, or that they don't actually explain the more local target of depression symptoms?
I guess that's kind of my question too, because I was thinking, I guess, more the first that the serotonin hypothesis for depression isn't like the going explanation, I guess. But maybe you think that, well, there actually wasn't great control to begin with, so that's why they don't have a good they don't think they have a good explanation or something like this.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice example. So, I mean, one worry that I think we have in these contexts is that these meds are really kind of covering up symptoms or addressing symptoms in a way that isn't addressing the root causal etiology of the condition. Such that if you lift off the meds, you still get the disease phenotype showing up. And so there is a sense in which, I mean, I think the meds are used because we do think that they have causal efficacy over a more narrow effect. But I agree that in this case, they're not giving us, at least it isn't clear yet that they're giving us the full causal story on etiology, but it might be that it's because we don't think they're targeting whatever factors are maybe more upstream that give a better explanation. But it's a really good point. We both, I mean, I think it might be a more kind of a different explanatory target. But typically, if we think it's something that's more a total prevention or a total cure, then it's targeted the causal etiology. Where if it's more symptom-based or focused on more of the endpoints, then it doesn't give you prevention or a cure. But nice example. Yeah, thanks, Caitlin.
Thanks. So as a scientist, I'm trying to think through what the benefits or what the benefits are for understanding these standards, and then also what potential worries I need to have as somebody who's implementing the standards. So I really loved the second piece, the ideal control, where things are fast and stable and strong. I think that's a really helpful way to think about it and feels accurate to how I experience science. I guess one of my worries as I may be implementing that, or as my colleagues or fields may be implementing that, is that a cause will, or an explanation will be better if I can increase the probability that this one toggle uh, controls the output or controls the outcome. But that may drive me to actually narrow the group of people that I'm studying. So I'll only study people of Northern European ancestry, or I'll only study um, male mice, or whatever it is, because in that scenario, I get a much more stable and more and stronger or more probable change. So I'm wondering, I love your point that like not completely strong and not completely fast and not completely stable factors are also really important. And I'm wondering, like with my social justice hat on, like what do we as scientists need to be thinking about when we're implementing these and expanding down the continuum so that we're not just taking the strongest?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And it's a space where it would be nice to have discussions with scientists about what they do value and what they want. So one thing to consider here would be that you get strength in cases where you narrow your population and you have something that now is very probability boosting, but you don't have stability in the sense that you can't explain it in a way that generalizes across a wider group of people. So if you also suggested that that's something you care about, then you wouldn't meet that standard. And what's interesting is, I mean, these are specified in a way that is motivated by some distinctions in cognitive science, but in more biology and neuroscience, there are standards where they kind of shove both of these together. So I think strength and stability kind of get shoved together. There are certain kind of concepts and notions where you can't, it sort of seems like both of them are desired or they're both packaged into a word. But that would be one way, would be to say, look, you haven't given an explanation that generalizes. Or I wonder if there's also pressure in the scientific community to give an explanation that covers a certain range. And if you haven't, then it's not yet as good as one that does do that. The flip side is that there are these interesting cases where sometimes drugs do work really well in a subgroup, and we kind of need to appreciate that. So there were these, I mean, it's very standard for these drugs to be studied in like white men. And there are various drugs that work in other groups for like blood pressure and other types of heart conditions, that they work better and worse across different groups of people. Or I think it was sulfa drugs, so that like they work great in the white male population, not so great in others. And so if you have a drug that works well that doesn't work well in the kind of white male population, but does in other groups, maybe we do want to kind of focus on drugs that work well in different subgroups. So I think it kind of depends on what your kind of population of interest is. Some of this is going to be packaged into the explanatory target. I mean, it also relates to this question of the questions that scientists ask, and this is how to answer them. This isn't really about what question should they ask in the first place. I think it's harder to say that. I can give a rigorous answer for how you should answer the question and how you shouldn't, but I can't, and I haven't said anything about the good types of questions to ask. I think that's a little harder. But it's definitely the case that, as was mentioned, if you ask a very narrow set of questions in a certain scientific context, you'll keep getting a certain answer. But there are cases where you won't get answers that capture social inequalities or social structures if you don't ask these like harder questions that don't always figure into the kind of standard why question framework. So yeah, stability might help, but then there might be cases where in a certain racial or ethnic group, some drug works really well and not in the like standard kind of white group that it was studied in, but you still want to like use that class of drugs. But yeah, it gets complicated how to kind of think about separating these out. One way in which I've kind of thought about distinguishing them is you can have causes that are, so here's strength, and so you can basically put strength and stability on different axes. You can get causes that max out on both. You can get causes that max out on one and not the other, here and here. And you can get causes that are low with both. And I think it's interesting to just think about the different cases where we have causes with different profiles, causes that are, low on strength but very stable. So aspirin reduces cardiovascular disease just minimally, but in everyone, right? So it's very stable, but it's a tiny little impact. And then cases where it's super powerful, high strength, but just in a narrow group of people. And then other cases, so here's like the paradigmatic causes, Mendelian genes, they've got both. Maybe one value of this is you see, we don't need all of our causes maybe to be in this category, but we're also just distinguishing these features. But yeah, helpful to think about how we should value these in our explanations. Yeah.
Thank you for this talk. And I'm thinking about whether control is actually tells us something that some factors are really necessary for the explanation. For example, in some experiments for like large language model, there are hedge effect, their input and output, and think the toy model is like there are three pathway between them, like pathway A, pathway B, and pathway C. And suppose we know that what is effective in this function is actually pathway A and pathway B, and when we ablate pathway A, the pathway C will take the functional role of pathway A. Then the system will still work stably. And when we ablate pathway C, the model will still work normally. But when we ablate pathway A and pathway C at the same time, then the model will just corrupt. Then we claim, oh, we control the model, so pathway A and pathway C is actually have a castle role, have an explanatory role in this phenomenon. But actually, what is really affecting, what is really working in this phenomena is just pathway A and pathway B. So I'm thinking about maybe when some control, even though it is really stable, it is really effective, that still cannot tell us that a factor really has a causal role or explanatory role in the phenomenon or in the process.
What would be the grounds on which it doesn't give you a causal and explanatory, or it doesn't play a causal and explanatory role?
Sorry?
What's the grounds on which it doesn't play a causal and explanatory role?
Because the information only pass through A and B, but it's not pass through C normally. Um, but when you take A away, then information pass through B and C. Sorry, maybe.
S-
That's some redundancy, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's a number of things. Well, so the cases that I'm looking at here are not like this type of case. They are situations where scientists don't have to worry about redundancy in the way that it's showing up in that system. They don't have to worry about it in the case of measles or diseases like scurvy or diseases like COVID. They are able to find these handles in the world that give them control in a way, where they don't have to kind of worry also about like failures of modularity or redundancy in the system. I do think there are going to be different types of causal systems where the standards for picking out relevant causes will differ. One of the things that I suggested is that, right, there are causes that are operating as constraints. In other work, we've looked at causes that are more pathway-like. They're giving you a kind of map of different routes you could take. That sounds a little bit more similar to what you're kind of discussing here, whether you have like a pathway that's available or not. I mean, another interesting thing to consider is how the explanatory target question is just different in those cases, so that you can give some kind of answer that gives you information about control, but they're a different kind of case than the ones I've focused on here. It would be interesting to see how considerations of control matter or don't for those types of cases.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I thought that was a really clear talk. I appreciated the introduction of like minimal, ideal, and more, because I thought that those were really explanatory. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about theory ladenness in this kind of situation, as well as like complex interactions. So thinking of like this only happens when these two things are present, and only when they interact in this particular way. That feels very theory laden, and kind of it bumps up against this minimal control component to me, but not in the same way that like vaccines don't cause autism. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So there's two things at least to maybe mention here. One of them is captured partly on this slide. In some of the causal explanations that we looked at, there's sort of one main upstream cause. In others, there's sort of multiple. You could think of them as like multiple inputs to the output that they want to explain. The lac operon is one example. You sort of need to know both about lactose and glucose in order to understand how the system is regulating gene expression. And so here, a way to think about it is in terms of them being kind of interacting causes. An ordinary life example is if you think of what controls like a lamp, the bulb turning on and off, you have the plugging the lamp in the wall, and you have the switch on the lamp. And there's a sense in which these are two different causes that need to like work together to get control over the on and the off. So this is a little bit similar to this notion of like interacting causes, where in order to get even minimal control, you need both. They work together. Essentially with one control, like, well, yeah, you can kind of see how one of them can totally shut things off, and so they both need to be in a certain state in order to get control over the system. So there are kind of notions for capturing, and we need to capture more complex systems where, of course, you have many different, not just causal inputs, but also intermediates and causes along the way. Yeah, the theory ladenness point is interesting. One thing it relates to is just the kind of context in which we want an explanation for the outcome, where we're interested in contexts that often have to do with real humans and real environments that they live in. And there is some packaging of those assumptions into our explanatory target. So we don't care about measles on the moon or conditions on the moon or temperatures outside the ranges we can live in, because we are interested in it in this particular set of like conditions and contexts. And so those are often kind of packaged in the explanatory target. And so I think one way to unpack maybe what you're referring to here as like theory latedness is to consider all the assumptions that are maybe unstated when a scientist specifies an explanatory target. They say they want to explain the presence and absence of this phenomenon, but it's in a very particular context. You know, it's not on the moon, it's not in, negative 200 Celsius temperatures. You can kind of partly see that with the lung example in lung cancer. So I,
I guess I was just thinking about like more like not just presence and absence, but like how the measles virus interacts with the body, and it may interact in particular ways that are explanatory in some way, and it may just be that these are not like causal explanations or something, but they're like I just was thinking to your term of mechanism and what mechanism means, how these causes interact kind of matter to them being causes in my head. I don't know if I explained that right.
yeah, I mean, maybe one way to think about this that I'm suggesting that could be different from the way some philosophers think about explanation is your explanatory why question is pretty narrow and you want one thing out of it. And that's not going to give you the full explanation for everything that matters for measles. And scientists need that because in order for them to give an answer that's good, right, they need a very narrow why question. If we talk about explanations as kind of a theory of everything, or I mean, even in the mechanistic literature, an explanation should tell you everything about the outcome of interest. That's going to make it really hard to ever give one because you haven't kind of asked a very clear why question for them to answer. So I think, to your point, part of what this can miss out on are all of these other features that are present in cases of measles that we might care about. But that's where scientists ask different questions that might require those types of factors. But it also captures how they're able to do this project in the first place, which is they need a very clear explanatory why question in order to give an answer and then maybe a good answer. So it's kind of this piecemeal way of thinking about systems are complicated and they ask many different questions about them.
Thank you. That helps a lot.
Thanks. That was great. So I'm wondering about this point you had about the starting point being scientists defining an explanandum and keeping it fixed, and then that fixing then informs the search for causes. So I'm curious about cases where there's this iterative relationship between target system and the search for causes. So you might define a target system and then go look for causes, but then your search tells you that you might be better off asking different why systems and inquiring about a totally different specification. Do those sorts of cases pop up in the history that you're in the literature that you're interested in? And if so, does the taxonomy of ideal, better and minimal explanation still work, or is there any amendment needed?
Oh, that's a fabulous question. One thing that I definitely think happens, so there's two things to point out. One of them is that a scientist first starts with an explanatory why question. And sometimes on the basis of what they find, they'll go back and they'll change it because they didn't find the right kind of causal stuff they wanted. Or what we didn't even talk about is all, about it all is sometimes they start with things they think are the important causes, like genes, and they just start manipulating them and they see what happens. And then they're like, okay, here are the genes I'm going to care about because I know what they cause. So you can start on both sides of the cause-effect relationship. Super fascinating that they're willing to completely change their explanatory target on the basis of what they find when they find some causal stuff that is integrated together. So imagine they first started, explanations for fevers was common in medicine. That's going to group together all kinds of stuff. So then you're going to want to narrow it to an explanation of a flu that has a fever, because now you have a more shared causal system that's going to be responsible for that outcome. So they're definitely willing to change the explanatory target on the basis of what they find, or they're always forming it on the basis of causal stuff they already know. So they're using that. Then the other really interesting thing to point out is sometimes they forget to keep it fixed. And so someone's like, hey, what causes measles? And we say a virus and all this stuff. And then they're like, well, no, but what about this thing about measles? And they keep going down, 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 down. Because if you keep refining your explanatory target in a way that makes it more reductive and detailed, well, sure, you could go down to all of these lower levels. The issue there is that they're not always keeping the explanatory target fixed. David Colosso has a really nice paper on explanatory shift that captures this. So one thing to do to help scientists in not feeling like explanations are the turtles, all the way down, or just like all of these details, is when you specify an explanatory target, it's got to be clear enough, it's got to be well defined, and don't change it. Keep it fixed. And so there's a lot of insights in how they're characterizing the explanatory target, and that's 100% a strategy and a tool they use to help them in their causal kind of explorations and inquiry. So it's a really nice point.
Thanks.
Thank you for the talk. I think I generally agree with you, and I also really like the way that you framed it in terms of just like the history of the debate about explanatory relevance. Two quick questions. The first one is just a sort of clarificatory one. So strictly speaking, at the beginning of your talk, you said you were going to give us an analysis of explanatory relevance. Understood that way, the talk about ideal control of strong, stable, and fast, are those best understood as sort of like various virtues that downstream, scientists think are important? But strictly speaking, it's the minimal control aspect that's part of your analysis that's defining the features of the boundaries of explanatory relevance. Is that right?
So no, I think all of the features matter. The minimal control is going to distinguish bad explanations from good ones, or when you start getting a partial explanation. So there's sort of like two things we want in this space. One of them is we want to say, in a binary fashion, not explanatory, and then like, yeah, you're getting an explanation. In my view, you can go from a partial explanation to a more whole explanation or a more complete one. So part of what we want to capture are like two things. When are they bad? And when are you on track? And how do they get better? So there's two kind of things I want to do in this space. Minimal control gives you the binary contrast. How they get better, sometimes called explanatory depth or explanatory power or explanatoriness with Railton. That's this thing here with ideal and more.
Okay, good. That's very helpful.
Okay.
And then I guess the second part is understood as minimal control being the demarcation, between the good and the bad. Does your account imply that that boundary can change depending on our, say, technological ability? So right now, it seems like having lungs is not a cause of lung cancer. But if in the future we have robot lungs, or the possibility of having robot lungs,
Yeah. Yeah.
does it become the case that having lungs is a cause of lung cancer?
So this is relying on our best current science. It's another way to respond to future physics.
Mhm.
So I also said that like atoms aren't used to explain measles, and someone could say, "Hey, not right now." But like my future physics has atoms, and so it's like, well, we don't currently have information or evidence that these factors present give you minimal control over the target. And yeah, we are making a number of assumptions. It comes up maybe with respect to the theory late in this point. We're not on the moon. We don't have heart-lung machines that we can like carry with us. So there's a certain assumptions packed into, and we're often interested in like explaining these disease outcomes now in current patients where we don't have robot lungs for them. And so sometimes I think it is helpful to bring some philosophers into this space of being focused on our best current science and also the background conditions we care about. There are some, there's fascinating cases that philosophers get really interested in where the Big Bang could be explanatory, or the heat death of the universe could come in and shut everything down. And the kind of scientists' interest in this fine-grained control can help, but also what they're kind of packaging into that explanatory target in terms of the kind of background conditions and properties of the individuals that in these cases have the disease phenotype or trait of interest. Yeah,
Thanks,
next
that's very
question.
helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, one last question.
Thank you. I really like your account, and can you go to the more control slides? Thank you. Um, I wonder that when you say like mediators should be proportional, just like could you say more about what do you mean by proportional? Because I think that in the really like complex biomedicine cases, that the causal chain is usually cross levels. So how do we decide that the levels is relevant and can be put into the causal explanation?
That is a great question, and it's not easy to do. This notion of proportionality is coming from some work by Woodward, and so there are kind of various attempts to capture in a rigorous way what it means for variables to be at the same level. In a generic sense, it's going to be similar to the kind of basic notions of control that I'm mentioning, in the sense that when you fix Y as your explanatory target, if you go just immediately upstream, you're looking for a factor that wiggles those two outcomes or gives you control over those two outcomes. And the idea is that if you include a causal variable in that case at different grains or different granularity, you can sometimes include more details than you need or too little in ways that don't capture a variable that matters for and gives you control over that target. There's a lot more that needs to be specified with respect to this standard and unpacked, but partly coming from Woodward's notion of proportionality. There's also work by Steve Yablo on proportional causes. It's a very nice question. I hope to fill it out in more detail. Yeah, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, please join me thanking Dr. Ross.